again, you will see the renewable communities on top. And it's a narrower category because less communities will qualify as this category because the criteria is stricter. So that's why this piece is also smaller, and that's how we came up with this formula. But this is of course just the beginning of the picture, because the implementation will require some work and effort from the governments, as I believe some of you know, because we include in the directive some notions which are, let's say, quite open. So we talk about the effective control, we talk about value-driven character, we talk about energy sharing, and geographical proximity. So what we do in the directive is that we do not define those terms, and this is not an omission, so to say. We wanted to keep these clauses broad enough so that they can be interpreted in the national legislation. So following the principle of not producing more law that is needed. So in a way, those concepts included in the directive, they can be referred to the institutions and regulatory solutions in member states applicable in other sectors. So for example, when it comes to the value-driven character, you could look at the commercial activities of charities or foundations, because in many member states, the NGOs, the charities, they can run economic activity, and this is the way what they do with their profit that determines their status. So it's not the fact of carrying an economic activity as such. So in a way, we encourage the member states to dig up for solutions in their national systems that are already there, and like this, all these elements can be collected and to enable the implementation. When it comes to other techniques for adopting implementation, so I'm really happy that we started this day with regulatory sandboxes. I found it very interesting to see this statistics about importance of flexibility for sandboxes projects, because the governments, thanks to regulatory sandboxes, they learn about the limits coming from regulation, as it was mentioned. As it was mentioned today. So in fact, they can be a laboratory. But also there are other actors that can help, because the NRAs under the Renewables Directive, they will be involved in shaping the active policy for renewable energy communities. So they should be also involved in this stage. And also not forgetting the regional and local authorities, because in a way, if you look at energy communities, some of them, they come from citizens themselves, but in some regions of Europe, it's actually the local authorities that give this first push to create the communities. So now, looking at some kind of possible scenarios, what might happen during the implementation. So the first one, the blue pyramid, we call it the box ticking, which means that we basically copy-paste the directive and we have something there, which of course is not optimal. The other one, we call it liberal approach. If you can come up with a better name, please let me know, because we try to figure how to call this approach. Is that when member states decide to also experiment with other formulas for energy communities, but they are quite stingy on the rights and privileges. So I believe the model of Polish clusters, where it's not required for the clusters to be incorporated, so it means it's more liberal than the directive, so that's why it's at the bottom. But at the same time, they have less rights. So the category is broader with less rights. The orange pyramid could be interpreted in both ways. So this is how we could place the regulatory sandbox. So it means that the regulation is limited to very small particular projects. So maybe a sandbox will have to apply even for the status for the NRA and not be created by law. Or it could be a national model where, which is more narrow. The criteria are stricter, but also they're being granted more privileges, more rights for their activities. Another option that we could think of is the ambitious and simple model, so the flat golden pyramid. It means that we can apply all the rights and privileges which are prescribed by the renewable electricity renewable energy directive, that we can apply them to citizen communities and also to national models. So like this, a member state can only has one regulation, but then it's being very generous for the models. But then this is something, in fact, that we would like to see. So a tailor-made implementation where we have, let's say, the whole family of different solutions for prosumers, where in the small triangles you tick the box to notify the European Commission about implementation. So let's say providing, let's say that the communities which are created under the conditions defined in the directives, of course they can enjoy the rights. However, in your member states, they might be different conditions when it comes to finance, community membership, maturity of civic society, and innovative sandboxes, and so on. So you can then experiment with different models and put them at different levels of rights and privileges. So that's the discussion we would like to start in the upcoming months. So we hope for a lot of feedback from you. How is it going in your member states? How is the negotiations with what was the discussion within ministries? And what are the goals that are to be achieved in your respective countries? Okay, so thank you for now.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from your side? Please.
Very quick one. My name is Gonçalo Mendes. I'm from LET, which is the university in Finland. You have elaborated on the concept very well, and you have specified.
Could you please speak up? Because
you have
on a microphone.
Yeah. Sorry about that. So you have elaborated on the concept very well. I saw some new things there that's very exciting. But I see that we still have two definitions from two different directives. And you yourself mentioned, why do we, let's not produce law that is not necessary, let's do just enough. Did it ever, these two definitions are incredibly redundant, obviously. Did it ever come across your mind, merging the definition? You may hear this a lot. Thank you.
Well, yes, there were discussions about it, but and you're right. But we try to make them as complementary as possible so that they don't overlap. But now we have them. They've been adopted by the co-legislators, so they're there, and this won't change so quickly. So yeah, so they will stay, and we need to make sure that they are implemented as coherently as possible.
So I guess we're not going to. Where does that come from? We're not going to take that step back.
It came from the history was that, okay, the purpose of the Renewables Directive is to increase the production of renewables. So we wanted to have something there. But then the Electricity Directive needs to, the purpose of the Electricity Directive is to recognize all the actors in the electricity market. So the idea was to also have them recognized in that directive. And now, the subject is slightly different, because one is all renewable energy and the other one is only all electricity. And
as you can see on the slide, so when it comes to energy sources, the scope of both directives is different. So if one deals with all the renewable sources, the other deals only with electricity. So the first thing. So if you have like a biogas installation, then you cannot regulate that in the electricity directive. Also, if you look at this, so in the internal market directive, it's about market actors, roles and responsibilities. So in a way, it's technology neutral. In the renewables, it's about the promotion of a certain switch in the energy mix. So you have to take different instruments. And if you look at the green part, which goes for the renewables directive, there is an active support policy and favorable conditions for the tenders. So in a way, you also can't regulate that in the electricity directive. So I understand that from outside, it's not maybe the most elegant way to legislate. I would love to maybe define it by delegation, saying that a renewable energy community is a energy community debt and putting extra conditions. However, this is not always possible, so we'll have to live with two definitions, and let's see what happens in the future.
Thank you very much.
Well, in that sense, I consider the renewable energy community to be actually broader in some perspectives than the citizen energy community. It's not that it's narrowing down, it opens new perspectives when it comes to heat, which is quite important. It's present inside. So I like this picture actually a lot more than the one which is narrowing down the scope.
Yes, that's correct. Finally, because the renewables is much wider. It's for heat, could also be for biogas and whatever.
Yeah.
So there's a whole spectrum that's not covered by the electricity directive.
Yeah, but at the same time, you know, the conditions for participation in the renewable energy community are very strict. So the definition is very narrow. And of course it comes from the political process, so in a way those definitions are a compromise, you know, among 28 governments. And of course, I mean, it's maybe a little game for you to figure out, because I think we have one government who has been extremely conservative on the communities during the negotiations, but then in the end implements a very liberal approach to implementation. It's for you to figure, I'm not saying. So that's why we really promote like this model of implementation, where you can mix and match the concepts and to see what are your local energy resources and what kind of initiatives you would like to see.
Okay, first, you, please.
I can speak up loud enough for you?
Yeah,
No,
that's
please
right.
take the
Okay,
mic,
I
because
have-
otherwise we can hear you on the stream.
Then should be switched on, I think.
Hello? Yeah. It's a small detail, but it's an important one for the projects that we are in, and for not giving the Dutch government the freedom to do the two steps forward, one step back. In a late state, you took out the obligation to national legislators to allow communities to own the grid. It was there as a should, and it turned to may in the very last version. Why is that?
Okay, so it was not the very last version, because the optionality for grid ownership has been introduced already in the Council General approach. So basically in the very first revision after we adopted the initial proposal. So there are several reasons for that. So firstly, you know, this such solution could go against the principle of unbundling. So we could be going back to the vertically integrated undertakings. And also when it comes to you know, the distribution grids on our side and on the European Union side, there's less competence. So in a way, when it comes to the electricity networks, member states tend to be very protective, and they bring, in fact, the arguments we have to respect, which are about the financing of the grids, and it's related to distribution tariffs and also taxation. So this is the areas where we can convince, we can share the good practice, but we cannot really impose such solution.
Those Venizelos, and then you, and then you round it up.
Well, just a comment on the issue that energy communities is a very, very important critical step forward for the energy transition. And we are seeing today, I think quite correctly, that there is a long way forward, and we have to do it together. And I think this brings a lot of importance and responsibility on implementation plans. And I'm looking at Michael, but we have to see how this today's exercise continues in the days ahead, how we can make it effective, because we are going to build a long process ahead of how can we help member states to implement it correctly, but with innovation and with high, let's say, optimism that it can really play the role that we have envisaged.
Thank you, Venizelos. Last question or remark?
Yes, it's a generalization of the question of Mr. Swens. So what is your stance about the implicit tensions between, on the one hand, the free market rules and lending rules, and on the other hand, the needs of these local energy communities or sustainable, the KICs as you know them, because they lead to what you call the vertically integrated or kind of natural monopoly. So I think, how could you make that more productive and less internal contradiction between, in essence, I think, European policy principles?
Okay, so first I think that member states are allowed to run the communities with a right to run the distribution network, but this is for the member states to decide. And in fact, we don't, given the feedback from the negotiations process, I don't think it's going to happen in a number of cases. So in a way, the communities will not be running the grid. And also already now, if you look at the communities, there is only maybe 3% of the existing communities that run the distribution grid. And it's mostly in legacy cases. So if there's a village located in the mountains or something like that, and there the citizens, they produced their own grid 80 years ago and they still operate it. So in a way, I do not see this risk at the very moment, because the communities, they have to comply with all the consumer protection legislation. So it's the member is able to leave it, just as it can abandon the supplier. So I do not see that risk, to be honest.
Thank you very much. I think Jan and Nikolai, I think it was very important, and thank you very much for coming, because I think this is a very important input for this group or these groups that are represented here, also for the stakeholders. And what is also very interesting, I think, is there's a lot of demand also from the European Commission for information, and I think there's a lot we can try to contribute, as Venizelos said, as well on the initiative level and national level, as also to bring back the feedback to the European Commission, or helping bring it back in a condensed form. As we are way ahead with the time and late way behind with the schedule, I would ask now the presenters of the initiatives. I mean, this is of course a very important part, and we need the information that you are giving, so don't hassle or don't rush too much. But please concentrate, don't talk too much about the processes or so behind, but try to concentrate really on what are the outcomes so far, what has been achieved so far. That means, what can we start working on together? Where can the others maybe contribute or be involved? Where are possible links? And also, what are you planning in the nearer future? So in the next half year, or in the next year maximum, because I think this is very important for the other initiatives to learn, they are trying to do a casebook, we are trying to do a whatever working paper on, and then we can think afterwards in the cooperation session how we can do this together. Having said that, we start with Hema Pisa. She's working as a consultant and expert for the Austrian Ministry of Transport, Innovation and Technology, and collaborating with Gaëtan Masson from the Becquerel Institute, and those two partners have taken on their shoulders to start last year the initiative on PV community self-consumption, a stakeholder group which is intended to implement what we have written in the implementation plan in Satellite Action 4 on this topic. And please, Gaëtan and Hema, tell us, how far did you come until now, and how are you going on?
Hello, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hema Bisa, and I'm going to present you now, together with Gaëtan, the stakeholder initiative we started last October. Our headline and our main topic is the self-consumption of PV power within a certain region and community. And maybe Gaëtan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Hannah. So, Gaëtan Masson, I'm the director of Recla Institute in Brussels, a research and consulting company. I'm also the vice chair of ATPV. One of the things that we're trying to do here is putting together all stakeholders, but also the main actors, which are trying for the time being to develop innovative approaches on self-consumption.
Okay. First of all, I would like to give you some background information. Why are we doing this, why we started this initiative? The European SNET plan is the technology pillar of the EU's energy and climate policy. In 2015, 10 key actions were defined, and what we do is we focus on Action 4. And the SNET plan, Action 4, aims at giving the consumer and the energy system more importance and building a resilient and secure energy system. So the main challenges in this context are to engage consumers, to build attractive technologies and smart services, and to guarantee system flexibility and security. And focusing now on the implementation plan of the SNET plan activities. The implementation plan for Action 4 comprises the following activities. On the one hand, it's to establish innovation environments for the development of smart services. This is what happens, for example, in Living Labs. And I would also like to point out Flagship Initiative 2 to develop integrated local and regional energy systems. The activities we started, they belong to Innovation Action 2.25, and the goal of this innovation action is to establish families of living labs, and in these living labs new technology service and systems should be developed for the direct use of PV energy on an aggregated level of multi-family buildings, districts or communities. So this is the background and this is the motivation why we started our initiative. First impression from our first meeting, it was in October in Brussels. I hand over to you, Gaëtan.
I can make it very short and simple. So we gathered 25 people from 8 European countries, focusing on different aspects of which are the problems related to self-consumption for the time being, and especially which are the problems related to innovative aspects. This was the first meeting, and we decided to continue with the second meeting, which was organized in Austria.
Yeah. In Austria we had in May our first Mission Innovation Austria Week, and within this conference we also organized our second stakeholder workshop. The focus here was, or our goals were, to identify relevant R&D projects, to bring European project leaders together, to exchange first experience in the projects, discuss barriers, and also discuss different legal aspects in the participating countries. And we also agreed on next steps. And mainly these, we had a third stakeholder workshop, it was just a few weeks ago.
Yes, the general idea was, since plenty of people are working on the subject, is to limit the number of diverse workshops and to group as much as possible initiatives. So we had, during the General Assembly of the European Technology Innovation Platform for Photovoltaics, an additional workshop together with a European project, the Horizon 2020 project called PV Prosumer for Grid, in order to exchange on these specific aspects. And that's what we will try to do even more in the future, is linking all initiatives that exist in order to better identify which are the issues and which are also the interesting findings.
Okay, and we agreed on two activities we are currently working on. The first one is that we are collecting cases and projects and project teams that are currently working on PV self-consumption projects in Europe. We created a template, we created a repository on the Xpera platform, so that everybody who is working on a project on a topic can join us. And the second initiative is that Livestream started to develop a living document on the regulation and legislation for PV cell consumption. I would like to give you a short overview on the cases. We try to make some kind of clustering in our last workshop in May in Austria. And we identified, we called it local energy communities in practice. So what I mean is, on that point, these are projects that are up and running now, like the ones we have in the Netherlands. We found that there is a cluster around projects that deal with energy trading, community building, and also advanced services. Another cluster is about energy grids and the integration of e-mobility, where we also have in Austria some projects, but also in Spain a big living lab turning tables. The fourth cluster is about sector coupling. So here we talk about heating, interseasonal storage, and hydrogen technologies. But to be honest, we do not have a lot of projects in that cluster. And the last one, let's call it the digital cluster. It's about artificial intelligence or blockchain solutions. Gaëtan, the overview of our activities.
So, we'll have an additional workshop in Marseille, in France, the second week of September, during the EUPVSEC, so the European Photovoltaic Scientific Conference, and we plan to organize an additional workshop somewhere in September or October, maybe in Brussels, maybe in a sunnier place, we don't know yet. I just would like to comment on what you said before. From PV point of view, we believe that sector coupling is something which will become extremely important in the coming years. And that's more and more PV electricity will be used to trigger the development of electric mobility, but also smart buildings. And that's all the problems that we would like to touch here are just at the base of the energy transformation. And so there are plenty of cases which could be added, so we just would like to keep it manageable. If you are interested one way or another to participate, just come to Hema or to myself in the course of this morning. And if you want to host a workshop, since we have no location for the time being, otherwise it will be Brussels, don't hesitate to raise your hands. We accept locations in the south of Europe.
So it will be in October, so we are looking for a sunny place. Okay, we will send out provide the slides afterwards. So just a few more links and information. Please also use the Xpera knowledge platform, where we have the use case repository. All the information about set plan and implementation plan you find under the following links. If you have questions regarding the strategy and policy, please ask Michael Hübner. And here is our contact data, so regarding the casebook, regarding upcoming workshops, wherever you would like to contribute, please contact either Gaëtan or me. And if you would like to contribute to the living document about regulation, here you find also the contact data of your friends. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Hema and Gaëtan. A very lively and interactive, quick overlook. Thanks a lot. And I think I'm quite sure that this stakeholder initiative will quite soon be taken up by different working groups in ETIPS PV or also in ETIPS NET. So I think we try to give it a start and let's see how it goes on. But I think it's alive and it's active. Are there any spontaneous questions of understanding to those speakers? If not, then we go on with Hans-Günther Schwarz. Hans-Günther Schwarz is working for the Austrian Ministry of Transport, Innovation and Technology in the same department. We are living close door to door in our offices, and he is leading the set plan working group, member states working group on set plan action 3.2, and he will explain what that is and what the initiative is.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So this is about I would say, joint program in the making, which is at least as big as the Smart Energy Systems program action. And I'll just make it short to begin with. So this came out of one of the SEPLAN temporary working groups. And the chair, the active chair, will have a meeting in actually next week, where we'll elect kind of a permanent chair of the implementation working group. There's co-chairs from industry and from the cities, and we'll have most likely an area to support our work next year. So I'll give you a bit of an overview, and it will be brief because I don't want to kind of blast you with all details. But we'll talk about governance, we'll talk about the goals, we'll talk about some of the support actions which I claim are just a blessing if you work together in a network of many countries. And we'll also talk about the definition that we're currently working on what is a positive energy or an energy positive urban district. Yeah, then we'll talk about links to other SEPLAN working groups. So we have 19 countries on board so far. Some are quite active, and I would say like 25% is not active at all. I think this will change as soon as we do our first joint call. We'll start joint calls later this year, and we're planning on having a joint call every year. This is now a starting point that we took in the very beginning. We joined forces with the Joint Programming Initiative Europe. We used the program management structure that the Joint Programming Initiative of Europe had created as our support structure. So JPI Europe is doing the program management more or less for us. And this is just an explanation to understand why those worlds of the SEPLAN and the JPIs are coming together. Here's a structure, and I'm showing this because I think this is another way to organize a joint programming platform. Because you have the ones who pay in the driving seat, that's the member states or the SEPLAN countries. You have the stakeholders in a stakeholder group, and here you all already find the first difference between energy systems and smart cities or positive energy districts. So what is it? We have no industry, because there is no problem owner from industry. There is a real estate development industry, if you will, but there's no industry that puts money on the table unless they build their own factory, right? So in the urban context, industry is not in the lead, despite other people thinking different. And of course, we plan them to create a citizen network. Here, a cities network where those problem owners can come together. And then there is this shy animal of the real estate developers, which we are still chasing. What do you need to set up a joint program, a transnational research and innovation funding program? Well, you need some solid terms of reference. And mind you, this is not between legal entities. This is an informal agreement. So we have terms of reference of the countries who want to pay for the establishment of a program management structure, and those countries put money on the table in different ways: cash, in-kind, personnel for the management team, and they agree on certain ways to arrange this. And there is no signature; it's just an endorsement. I'm saying this because that's also the nature of our transnational research and innovation funding collaborations across the SEPLAN, that there is no legal framework for that which would allow us to have this decided for the next 4, 5, 7 years. It's voluntary, it's based on trust, and it's based on experience and on good practice. What we'll do this year is we'll establish the structure. It's almost there. but we'll have to make sure and find ways for the participating countries to put forward the personnel, the kind of secondments that are needed to run the program management and to build a program management structure. We'll have that. We'll have a roadmap which we're currently working on. We have joint actions and joint calls which we'll start to launch every year. So that will be a core agenda, and we'll experiment with funding instruments which will allow us to really help those actors, the problem owners, the cities, which we think would be the ones to lead the implementation. And that's another thing in our program, in our platform. We're going beyond research and innovation. Now with research money, that's difficult, as many of you will know. So what we do is actually we team up with those actors who are able to bring about the implementation. We try to support them in learning new things, in giving them personnel over time, living labs, similar to what we have from HEMA. Last but not least, we'll have this network of positive energy cities, if you will, up and running in November, and you're all invited to join if you want. It's the first week. And the important thing is with such a research and innovation funding network that it's always subject to political cycles, because if you have 15 countries in the network, or 20 in our case almost, 5 of them are always in a downturn in their political cycle. There's elections coming, there's a scandal, Austria, there is a reorganization of the funding system, there is, you name it, right? So for such a network to function well, we need glue money. And that's what the co-funds have proven to be in a very good way. In early times we had the airnets, which was just a bit of support in terms of persons who could help, but here now we can really remain active and we can create a structure that will support us over time. So now we're starting actually with a gift from the JPR Europe. This is one from one of the airnet conferences which we did on smart cities and communities. We had administrative costs kind of foreseen, a budget foreseen for the valorization of the results of the airnet, and we decided in our consortium that we'll use that for the promotion of positive energy districts, because we believe that positive energy districts is a logic successor or logic outcome of much of the work that smart cities that is doing in the smart cities field. 2020 we will hopefully be able to do another NN co-fund. That's glue money. That's where that will propel us over a few years. And from 2021 onward, there is an option of being part of the new partnership on clean energy transition, and I think that's going to be an important step for the whole SNET plan community, for all the actions, because that will help us to finally implement. For some it will be difficult because they've never done serious research funding collaboration. For others it will be business as usual. That's why it's so important for us to set up this program management network and environment, so that we can train our skills, that we can see what works, what doesn't work, so that we are ready to go to really start by 2021, 2022, when the new partnership will be functional. This is our model for the research and innovation program, the transnational program that we are setting up right now. You can see the program owners are in the center, so it will be their needs that we'll try to cover. We'll support them through living lab actions. We'll support them through alignment actions, so that cities don't have to compete with one another for a project across borders, because that's ridiculous for cities. Often they don't have anyone who speaks a foreign language in their city council, because that's not what they're made for, right? So they are local, they are regional, national entities and not transnational entities, except of course the big cities like Barcelona and Vienna. So, and proceed then to the development of tools and new methodologies and technologies, projects which will help with integration of technologies. And you'll always find there's like those two pillars. One is technology and its integration, and one is the non-technological aspects, which are by far more dominant when it comes to implementation. And then, of course, once you have successfully implemented a energy positive neighborhood urban district in your city, you want to roll it out across other neighborhoods or districts. And that's where replication eventually comes for, or you go to a neighboring smaller city or whatever. And if you start a new program these days, you would please try to start a ongoing program evaluation and monitoring, because that's the state of the art, I would say. Yeah. Now the definition, and that's something where we were a bit nervous for quite a while. And the reason is that if I go to most of you, you would say, hey, positive energy means, hey, there's a balance, right? You're balancing energy. You have energy coming in, energy being consumed, energy being produced. And that's what most of the research institutions would tell us, right? And after quite some discussions with our colleagues from other SNET plan actions, especially the community represented here, we found that we had to define it by the function of the largest consumer in the energy system, because urban entities, urban spaces are the largest consumers. And so what's the function, the role of this consumer in the renewable energy network or a system? Well, it is to be a flexible consumer. It is to be a provider of storage. Of course, you want, wherever you are, to make a contribution to the generation of renewable energies. But this is not your only purpose. So your purpose is to be energy flexible, to store, to contribute to the resilience of the energy system, and to contribute to the flexibility of the energy system. So I didn't tell you anything about balancing, right? So the balance comes last, in a certain way. Of course, it is not last, it's in the definition, it comes first because, yeah, we're talking about positive energy, but actually the most important thing is resilience, balance, storage, flexibility of energy consumption. This is the defining factor. That means also that you have three main functionalities of such a neighborhood, which will be different in any given location. So in some locations, the efficiency part will be the most important. So you optimize it using the efficiency. In some other locations, it might be the energy production, renewable energy production. In yet others, it will be the flexibility. And we claim that in most cases, flexibility will play a very important role. And that's then just how you could start defining or comparing the different levels of such a definition, where you say, okay, you have a general framework given with those three main functions. And then you have methodologies of how to enter into this framework. And those methodologies will, some of them will be more regarding a balance, an energy balance, input output. Some will more be like 2000 watt society. Some will be like Zukunftsquartiere, whatever. And they're all playing a very important role, but it's up to us, the SNET plan action, to provide a framework to begin with. And then, of course, out of all those methodologies will come certification labels, and that's just the natural course of the development. Now, just to give you a hint regarding the interaction between the separate actions. So we have the energy systems, we have the positive energy district, and we have buildings, and there's a natural distribution of work that we should have, which we still have to agree upon, but that's going to happen. This is the first time we really sit together, and I think based on, this is just a proposal for our discussion, and based on what we discuss, we'll be able to move forward together. We could have joint calls together, or certain themes in our calls that we share. We could have joint actions or joint programs, projects together, or platforms like Xpera, where we work out more new definitions, new strategies, whatever you do. Yeah, and then I come to the last thing which bothers us, and that's the absence of a suitable market framework. Because the reason why so many people say, hey, industry needs to be there because they invest, they are the big investors, is because they do invest. In many cases, when there is a scalable technology, like most of the renewable energy technologies are scalable. That's why industry comes and just, builds the windmills, builds the photovoltaic production factories, you name it. Or go take offshore wind. I mean, huge investments. Because it pays off, and very soon. Then we have the energy systems. Well, you don't have a scalable technology, or very little. But what you have is big investments, hundreds of millions, billions actually. That's why we have the energy market framework. That's why we have the regulator. They are only there to make sure that the utilities can earn their money back over the next 30 years. That's the energy market framework. Now, we don't have that in the cities. So we need to think hard and fast and creative to find ways to really define business cases, or to find ways to have a secure framework over a certain time, so that positive energy districts have an economic chance. And that was my second to last slide, but I'm not going to go into more details. Thank you very much, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Hans Günther. That was now the initiative from the positive energy districts, and now we come to Ludwig with the third initiative, and this is Ludwig and Ashim. Thank you very much. You will tell us about the initiative that has started in the bridge. You say briefly what the bridge is. More or less the knowledge community of the European funded projects and Evanet Smart Energy Systems together, a task force on energy communities.
Thank you. We wanted to show you a couple here, Ludwig and Lane, but on short notice, Lane couldn't come and she sent her young colleague Achille, so you have the old and the young instead of the people in the debate. The bridge, most of you will know the bridge is, say, the gathering of the European level funded projects in energy. They have working groups. They meet regularly in the working groups, and once a year they meet in the General Assembly. And when this last General Assembly happened, was it March, February, I can't recall, the discussion came up that there are some cross-cutting topics that could not be handled in one of the working groups of these projects. And one of these cross-cutting topics is exactly energy communities. So we had the presentation as we had it today. And at the end, someone, I think more or less it was Mark van Stiphout, decided that we need a task force. And two people volunteered to lead the task force. That was Ludwig and Lane. So that's why I'm standing here. And that's why we are cooperating. And meanwhile, we are a little group that has the topic local energy communities in both flavors, of course. And our mission is more or less to provide more insights in energy communities and build a European knowledge community, mainly for the purpose to tackle these issues in research. So it's not that we are trying to get to all the regulators and legislative parties in Europe. It's the level of research, but there is a lot to be researched. If we open the discussion, we have 100 questions immediately, so there's a lot to do. So the task force has the task to tackle these issues and prepare programs, projects that should take us a little bit further. So as I said, the two of us want to lead it. What can we do? And what do we do? First of all, we implement a survey with the bridge projects. So I don't know how many these are. You know them, is it 30 or 35? I don't know. Many. So we ask them, what are you doing about these local energy communities anyway in your projects? What have you found? Then we also analyze as far as possible the legal framework in Europe and also European level, but also the national levels. And what we said, okay, there's so much to say and so much to collect and assess. So we set up a knowledge platform. I will show you in a minute how that works. It's a repository of best practice.